Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jena Brown.
Kevin Tumlinson.
Yeah, and JD is off today. So with us instead, we have Dick Wybrow guest hosting with us. Dick is a Canadian author and former stand-up comedian who writes thrillers that cross over into many genres. So welcome, Dick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm speaking to you from Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm in the future. It is right now. It is tomorrow from where you are.
Can you give me the lotto results?
We are in New Zealand. It's a big thing here. We are sworn to secrecy about the future. All I can say, though, is stay away from Steve. That's really all I can mention at this point. Avoid Steve.
You're not telling me anything new, Dick. All right.
That's less about the future, just more in a general sense, really. Just avoid.
That's more of a hygiene Steve. Kind of thing. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
So yeah, JD is off as we are airing this. It is his book launch day for his erotic thriller Behind a Closed Door. So I am sure, JD, you have your hands full, and I hope the launch is going well. Good luck.
Yeah, keeping an eye on that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And you have a book releasing too, Kevin.
I do. Yes. It'll be a couple days after this airs on the 15th. I've got my book, The Forgotten Rune, is a archaeological thriller goes live. So very excited to see. It's been a while since I've done a full length release. So I'm kind of getting back in the saddle.
Yeah.
After a hiatus, I guess.
Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So go buy it.
Well, good luck with that.
We need this. I need that success. I need that win. Thank you, Dick. Yeah, I need that. So yeah. What else we got going on? I know we got news items.
We do have news going on. Yeah, what's going on in the news?
All right. Well, Simon & Schuster to acquire Holland's VBK. This is coming out of Publishers Marketplace. Simon & Schuster is set to acquire VBK, the largest publisher in the Netherlands, marking it Simon & Schuster's first acquisition of a non-English language publisher to boost its international presence. Post-acquisition, VBK will continue to operate independently within Simon & Schuster. This acquisition is seen as a strategic move to enhance Simon & Schuster's global distribution capabilities, particularly in the Dutch-speaking regions, and to provide VBK's authors with opportunities to reach international markets. Sounds good on paper.
It does.
Oh, this is the first since they were acquired by the
KKR
venture capital firm, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. They're expanding.
And they'd said that they wanted to go a bit international from last year. And, Netherlands seems like it seems small. I mean, it's not like it could have been Liechtenstein. But they've got, they publish like 1,500 titles a year or something like this. So, and supposedly this is going to be an opportunity for those authors, those Dutch writing authors, to get more exposure. So I think hopefully it's going to be a really good thing because they're maintaining some autonomy, at least at this point. So it's basically, go do your thing and be a part of our family. So it seems like it could be a great deal.
Yeah. I think it's always great to expand international reach and, they got to make some money to KKR, so go.
It seems like
Simon
the Dutch
Schuster.
market. That's always the first one anyone branches into. It seems like that's what way back when Kobo released their kind of like their KDP, the version of Kobo, and that was the first market they hit. It was like the Netherlands and then all that. Is that all related? I don't know.
And you do see I'd say random, but you see random markets on occasion that pick up on stuff. Like I found some random success, like in Germany.
Yeah.
It's like that pops up. So it's like that caught me off guard. And so maybe it was the sort of thing they took a look and they saw titles like the stuff that they were doing would work well in the Dutch-speaking world. And they say, let's take advantage of that. So it'd be great. It'd be really interesting to see how this progresses.
Yeah. We'll keep an eye on it. Next up, KDP Virtual Voice Beta has produced over 40,000 Audible titles. This is also coming from Publishers Marketplace. Amazon's beta program for KDP authors to create audiobooks using synthetic machine narration has successfully produced over 40,000 audiobooks available on Audible. Some Audible customers have requested a search filter to exclude these titles with virtual voice narration, indicating varying preferences among listeners regarding synthetic narration. Despite some customers' reservations, the machine-generated audiobooks have received positive feedback with an average overall rating of 4 or higher, suggesting a generally favorable reception among listeners. I did predict that people would want to be able to filter those results. So
Yeah. Yeah. We predicted this split, right? There are some people that are going to want human only, and then some who are not going to care. I just know that I am still waiting for my invitation to the beta. Amazon, I'm checking my email inbox. Yeah. I don't know.
So of the 40,000, fully 150 of those titles are at least mine. So I did get mine in that program.
I know
And
you
I've
did.
really, I like it. I like the option.
Yeah.
For the first time in my career, I'm going to have a book release alongside audio. So, you know, do with that what you will. But I've had lots of people asking me if there was going to be an audiobook release and how long it would take, et cetera. And finally, I get to tell them like it's going to come out the same day as the book. So I'm pleased by the whole thing.
So how much manipulation do you need to do with this, Kevin? I mean, because I got to assume you got to go in and listen to it, and sometimes the emphasis is on the wrong syllable, and so you've got to mess with it.
No, you are wrong. You get no
Really?
control over this at all. Yeah, no.
Oh,
It is it
oh.
is on or off, and that's the only options we get. So far. But I've gotten to listen to it, but only sort of after the fact. It's like they tell you right away, like it's going to go live. You know, make sure that you're fine with it going live with no input from you whatsoever. So at least that's my experience. Now, I'm notorious for having not read something. So if anyone listening to this knows something different, like I was given no option to make any alterations, but I've rolled with it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. And they are making improvements. I know an email came out, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, that there are new voices, new things they're doing.
Yeah,
But
they're updating it.
yeah, I think there's going to be a split audience like there is with everything, right? You're going to have those audiences who want the narrators they like and really care about human narration. And then you have the different audience who tends to be in KDP that listen to their audio at 2 times speed. So, I mean, at that point, it doesn't really matter who's narrating when you're listening to it that fast, right? So, yeah.
Although, I mean, I've got some folks that I know that are narrators, and they've got. I mean, there's cause for concern anytime you get machines coming in and doing your job and that sort of thing. But they're all fantastic. And I know plenty of authors, plenty of narrators. Ray Porter comes to mind. He's got entire fan pages where people will go in and they'll listen to anything he's ever done. And he's obviously fantastic.
Yeah.
So I guess it's maybe a little bit like some of the AI push with some of the novel writing as well. It's going to be a part of this, but people will gravitate towards the humans they happen to like. So, I think it's something to keep an eye on because it is a sort of thing that since it's so cheap, it can blow up. But I don't know. It's coming one way or another.
Yeah,
it is. It's already here. All the major players are already doing it. I will say the mistake that Amazon is making is making this an either or thing where you can either have the AI narration or you can have human narration. Others like Apple, who are letting you do both with no problem, I think they're going to make out better because as this whole thing indicates, there's people who are going to want the human narrated and people who don't care either way.
Yep.
And Amazon's going to be leaving money on the table. So I don't expect that to last long.
I don't know if I would have a book narrated by AI, but I would like a virtual me just to replace me because I don't like talking to people very much.
Yeah.
If that were an option where I could just
people request that I get a virtual me because they don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like in an argument with your spouse or something like that, you could just tell a virtual me, give them a call, fix this before they get home, but don't promise anything like foot rubs or vacuum. Just take care of this, please.
And no flowers.
Yeah.
Turn off the flower feature. All right. So
what do you have against flowers?
I got nothing against flowers except I'll buy flowers for my wife, but it has to be a really special thing. If I'm just buying her flowers all the time, they're meaningless. She does not agree with this philosophy.
No, man.
I don't agree with it either. I think that when you buy them randomly, that actually makes it more special.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Although you gotta make sure when you do that, so they go, why you buy me flowers? What have you done?
Yes.
Well, that's your fault for setting that association up. So.
And I've learned they have to be real flowers. If they're not,
of course.
I learned that the hard way.
Kevin. All right, we're
on
gonna
our
have
wedding,
a talk
our wedding
this.
day. Okay, speaking of flowers, this has nothing to do with that. Billionaire helped bring 3 Body Problem to Netflix. Dun dun dun. His business partner ensured he never lived to see its premiere. Sorry, that one cracked me up. Chiao, a lawyer and former executive, was convicted of poisoning his boss, Lin Chi, the CEO of Yuzu Games, using lethal toxins he created in a home lab. The murder was premeditated, involving meticulous planning and the use of over 100 different poisons, echoing the plotline of the American TV series Breaking Bad. The conflict between the two reportedly stemmed from disagreements over the management of and adaptation rights of the 3 Body Problem, a popular sci-fi trilogy. She was initially brought into Yuzu to secure rights and lead the adaptation project, but was later sidelined due to underperformance and disagreements with Lin. Following the acquisition of adaptation rights, she was demoted and his annual salary significantly reduced. Lin Chi and another executive were listed as executive producers on the Netflix adaptation, while Xi's role was minimized, increasing tensions.
The whole thing was just wild. I read like so many articles on this.
This was the wildest story.
And I loved this book, right? I love this book.
The Netflix movie about this is going to be called The 1 Body Problem.
Oh, well,
or the 4 Body Problem.
Yeah, he tried to kill 4 people, but only one of them died.
Oh, the 4 Body Problem. Okay. That's perfect.
Well, and the funny part is, at some point, they'll probably turn this entire story into another Netflix series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the irony being is this guy probably approach and say, "Hey, I can consult." They say, "You're really not the guy for the job." Mm-hmm. So he probably wouldn't get this job either. But no, it seems nuts. I mean, what was it apparently that he ended up like getting tasked with being involved with 3 Body Problem and some of the licensing and that, and they just decided you're not the guy for us. And he got so mad, he ended up getting like, it was one of the articles said he had like 160 cell phones. He had like this shell company out of Japan, and he ended up bringing in all these toxins and mixing up in a lab. This guy was nuts, or an amazing scientist that just was in the wrong gig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, listen, I respect the dedication to vengeance. You know, I respect it. But wow, like, I'm like, wow, you are really mad. Like,
really mad. Yeah. So poisoned 4 people. And emulated Breaking Bad, I guess. I had idolized that. And I was just reading all these articles as they were coming out going, is this real life? Like, what is going on?
Well, I think the very first one came out around April Fool's Day. And I thought it was just...
Yeah, it was at the beginning of April.
Yeah, I thought it was just a joke post, and it was not. Yeah.
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 This is much more interesting than the show itself, though.
Oh, I love the show. No, I love the books and I love the show. No, I think it's all good.
I haven't watched it yet. My son loves it, though. Yeah. He watched it. Him and his wife devoured it. And
I've watched 2 episodes so far. I'm going to watch the rest. I will watch it. And someone spoiled it for me by sending me something. I didn't realize what I was watching at the time, but I was watching spoilers for the show. So I know something that happens, but
it won't spoil it because it kind of cliffhangers into the next season, as it should. But it's great. I mean, it's a book that really has a quantum physics basis, which as a nerd, I nerd out on. I was telling Jena, it has like one of the best descriptions of quantum physics in the book, using billiards, which I'll paraphrase, but it's like horrible. It's like, just imagine you're playing billiards, and when you break, one ball goes into a pocket, but one shoots across the room, one flies around, and one sinks through the table, and that's quantum physics. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. So he did a beautiful job making quantum physics like fun and easily understandable. So yeah.
I got to up my coworker game, because I mean, this guy got so mad at his coworkers that he killed one of them, trying to kill 3 others.
Yeah.
I get angry with a coworker. I may have taken a bite out of somebody's sandwich that was left in the fridge. And so maybe, I'm not really applying myself at this point.
Yeah.
He did take it to a very extreme level. That is for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Like, I've been mad at people, but I don't know if I've been 160 poisons mad. Like,
No.
I'm gonna have to rethink my anger levels here.
Yes. But apparently, the Chinese legal system did not appreciate it because he has received a death sentence. But that's a whole other
I'm
thing
not
we could
exactly
talk
sure
about.
any legal system would have appreciated it.
Yes.
And what's fun is they sentenced him to death the day after the show premiered.
Yeah.
Just to twist the knife just a little bit more, which is amazing.
Oh,
That's kind of a fun justice system, except for the killing part.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope
I'm
they
with
just
you.
renew the show and this doesn't cast a shadow over it because I loved the first season.
Yeah.
If anything, they're going to lean in on this like that. That's the best kind of publicity for a show. Is the drama. If they do, I promise you, they will do the Netflix murder documentary. That's what they're known for,
Mhm.
and that's going to tie in probably with the second season. Coming out. I could just see it. If no one's doing that, someone's asleep at the wheel at Netflix.
Absolutely.
Amazon Prime or Apple should pick up buy this.
Oh, that would be so funny. That would be worth the ticket price right there if someone got that story out from under Netflix and did
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be nice little plot twist.
Yeah.
When you're writing a book, the first draft is the easy part. It's what comes after that hurts. The confusion, the self-doubt, questioning this, questioning that, trying to get feedback so you can feel confident making changes. It's a lot to handle. And that's why I'm delighted to say that this episode of the Writers Inc. podcast is sponsored by Autocrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, Autocrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that can make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. From start to finish, everything you need to produce a strong, confident story is at your fingertips. Get instant developmental feedback on plot, conflict, characters, themes, and more through the Story Analyzer. And edit each sentence to perfection with a complete interactive editing suite packed with reports and insights. And that's not to mention additional benefits like private community forums and live members-only support, and writing sessions every single week. It's an incredible place to be for any writer. And listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can take advantage of lifetime Autocrit Pro membership for one single payment. That's right, no renewal fees. Head to autocrit.com/JD to get yourself a lifetime membership now. Big thanks to Autocrit for sponsoring the show. Who we got coming up today?
So up this week, it is KimBoo York. KimBoo is a librarian, a technology historian, and an author who's passionate about productivity. So KimBoo has written novels in multiple genres, including nonfiction about serial fiction and discovery writing. So here she is, KimBoo York.
All right, so KimBoo, in 2011, you rebooted your life after some significant losses and challenges. How has this approach to starting anew shaped your journey as a writer?
Wow. Yeah, you really hit you're opening with the hard balls. I love it though. I love it. Nobody's really gone back that far in my story. So previously there were a lot of changes already. Like I had just gotten divorced. I was in the middle of graduate school. I was actually sneaking up, unbeknownst to me, on catching whooping cough, which would be a major turning point in my life. And so, I kind of had to learn. Oh, and what an era, right? Like self-publishing was really starting to explode. I had just been signed on with an independent publisher, a small publishing house, and I was trying to finish graduate school. I had so much going on. Some might even say too much going on. And I did end up having to kind of reframe. It was the first of many times I've had to reframe exactly what I want out of my author career.
Mm-hmm.
That is an ongoing journey for me personally. I know a lot of authors, especially because I, swim in the romance genre era most of the time. Some authors, they dialed in on rom-com, and that's what they do, and that's what they've been doing forever, and they love it. It's like those kids who decided they wanted to become doctors when they were 5, and then actually became doctors. That's so far beyond my understanding. So I've had to kind of restart and reboot myself several times along the
Yeah.
way. I do consider myself fortunate to have previously in life been through some pretty hard times. The loss of my parents in my mid-20s was a very steep learning curve. I do not wish on anyone, but it did teach me a lot of resilience. And I think that's something that's very important for authors to have in this career field. If you're going to be writing as a career, not just for funsies, which I'm all about writing for funsies. I was in the fan fiction community for years. But if you're going to take it seriously, you're going to have to practice resilience because trends change, your own tastes change. I've noticed lately I'm switching out of the genres I used to write in, and I'm shifting genres myself. The new serial I'm getting ready to launch is a brand new genre for me. So yeah, that was my takeaway there. You got to have some resilience, and I had plenty of opportunity to practice it.
Yeah. And when we talk about serials seem kind of like this new thing to a lot of authors, or it's kind of this like fringe storytelling, if you want to argue that way. Being a serial fiction writer myself, I'm aware. But with your latest book, Becoming an Unstoppable Storyteller, you focus on writing compelling serials. What draws you to serial writing, and how do these serial storytelling differ from traditional or even standard indie publishing?
So one of the things I like to point out to people, JP, and as you as a serial writer yourself, you already know this, but for your listeners, you have to understand that serial storytelling, serialized storytelling, however you want to phrase it, is one of the oldest forms of storytelling we have in humanity. Like it's the bard going from, tavern to tavern, telling a story over the course of 3 weeks. It's how stories have been reframed and told in bits and pieces over the years. So this is a modern take on a very old form of storytelling. The technology, I think, has caught up now to make it more accessible for readers. People have been telling serials and serialized stories online since the internet exploded in the 90s. We've had authors doing this for a long time, but only recently has it gotten to the point, Wattpad was 2017. We just had Ream launched last year. Self-hosting platforms like WordPress and Wix and Squarespace, they're finally getting to the point where the reading aspect of it is engaging and keeps readers interested. So that's kind of my perspective on it as a story. Now, for me, I think this all goes back, and I'm going to fly my geek flag pretty hard here. But I was in the theaters when Star Wars: A New Hope came out in the 70s, and it blew my little baby girl brain. And one of the things I really loved about it was it just kept going. And, I read Nancy Drew, I read Hardy Boys, I read The Black Stallion, I read, as I got a little bit older, I read the Perth books. And so I was used to stories being series, of having continual stories being told. But I hadn't really thought of just a story, a very long story, a very rich and involved story. Hadn't really occurred to me as a writer. And I kind of toyed with it over the years. But as I've matured as a writer now, having gone through self-publishing and working with an indie press and writing romance novels and writing a lot of nonfiction and being a journalist, I'm just like, I want to tell those long stories. I really do. In fact, the story that I'm getting ready to launch in February, Dragon's Grail, I originally conceived that as a series of novellas back in 2016, 2017. Shelved the idea, that just didn't feel right. And now that I'm redoing it as a serial, it's going to be on Ream. It just feels like so much fun. Like I'm just having so much fun getting back into the story and thinking the whole massive world building. It's a fantasy. So on the massive world building and the adventure the characters are going to go on. It's just very exciting for me personally. It's really fitting into both my history as a reader, as a fangirl, as someone who loves ongoing stories, and now me as a writer coming into a point in my life where I feel like I'm both have the technology to do it and I have the skills to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Serial fiction storytelling is so fun.
Oh,
There's something
it
about,
is.
I always come down to the word proximity whenever I talk about serialized storytelling, because it's like I'm very close to the story as it comes out, but I'm also close to those readers. So what you're saying really rings a bell there.
Proximity. I really love that. I I consider myself what I call an au courant writer, which I means I post the story, deliver the story while it's still in development and still being written. I generally give
hmm
myself a pretty good lead time. I give myself a padding. I'm not one of those writers who can write a chapter and then release it later that week. I do know those
Yeah.
people. I admire them greatly. It's not me. But yeah, the proximity, the knowledge that the fans are going to want the next installment, that I'm going to figure out what happens next because I'm a discovery writer, I'm a pantser. So like for me, it's just really exciting all the way around. I love that word proximity. I'm gonna
Yeah.
steal that one, JP,
Good.
because that's
Take it.
good.
It's free for you. Um, but I'm curious, especially being pantser, how do you go about structuring serial compared to
Mm.
standalone novels or even series, and especially when it comes to like pacing and plot progression?
So that's why I wrote the book, actually.
Yeah.
The basis of the book is, and I'll send you the link so you can include it in the show notes for your
Yep.
listeners. But the basis of the book was a spreadsheet. And I built this spreadsheet originally, it's in Google Docs, or Google Sheets, for a small writers group, a small forum of writers that I was part of. And we were talking about doing series. We weren't really sure what serials were. And we were looking at how uh, famous long running stories, I mean, classic Lord of the Rings. And then we were also comparing them to Chinese and Asian dramas, very long running dramas. One of my favorites is Nirvana and Fire. It's 50 episodes long. It's a time investment, but oh, it keeps you on this, it keeps you glued. Like you just can't let go of it. Fantastic piece of television drama, but we were trying to break it down. So I built that spreadsheet, and then as I built it out and started looking at the beats, I realized there was a lot more to explain. And so I wrote the book. But to answer your question, for me as a pantser, what I realized that the key of a pantser is holding on to the curiosity. Once I know exactly what's going to happen, I'm not interested in that story anymore. My
hmm
brain just doesn't work that way. But on the other hand, I do need the structure. I do need a framework. So what I like to have are beats, and that's what I developed with the spreadsheet, was just beats. So in other words, I might not know what the inciting incident is for, a three arc, multiple scenes type of story. I may know only that my character is, a student of the sword and he's got to travel across this river and something's going to happen. So the beat is the inciting incident. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I know that's what I got to write. So for me, that's how I structure it because I can look at both the immediate story structure, which I call the series arc, and then the long story structure, which is the long arc that is the umbrella holding all the other story arcs together. And know I have to hit those beats as I go along, even if I don't know what's going to happen. So for me, that really works. I do know some other people who really like to use that spreadsheet as to build outlines from, and then they start writing the story from actual outlines. But for me, that works really well.
Yeah. When it comes to like genre conventions, especially with long form serials, do you notice a difference in comparison to traditional novels of like, are there more blends when it comes to these genre conventions or more depth? Like what is your hot take on genre conventions when it comes to fiction telling?
Well, I think a lot of times when people think genre conventions, what they are thinking of is structure. And I
hmm
don't think they're thinking as much as like tropes or character arcs so much. And so in the romance genre, certainly there's, very classic, no, I don't want to say rigid, but very formalized structure of how a romance novel is supposed to be. So what are you going to do for that? How are you going to turn that into a serial? And so what you might end up doing in that particular instance is keeping those individual romance beats for couples within a larger story, and then change the romance from one to the other as you go along, or break up the main couple, have them have another romance. But I think what you really have to think about if you're going to be writing a serial is the world building. And people, when I say world building, people think, oh, fantasy, science fiction. One of my best friends is a historical fiction author, not romantic historical fiction, like very literary historical fiction. And she was working on a chapter, and I said, "Oh, you're having to do so much world building for this." And she's like, "It's not world building, it's history." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" Because you're having to rebuild a history, you're having to rebuild a world that doesn't exist anymore. And when she looked at it from that angle, she was like, oh. Because I think she was like looking up, like, what would somebody drink at a soda fountain in such and such year? And I'm just like, I don't know. She couldn't make it up like I would in a fantasy novel, you know? It's like the fairy juice potion. Yeah, that's it. But she had to actually do research to find it, but she's still world building. Invest yourself into a world that you want to adventure in yourself, whether it's for romance, whether it's for science fiction, whether it's for historical fiction, whether it's for literary fiction. Invest yourself in a world where you want to go in and you want to know what people are drinking at the diner. You want to know where people went to school. You want to know how long school took. You want to know all these little bitty details. How do people get around? All these little details, and that if that interests you and you want to fold your characters into that, then you have a really good basis for doing a long-running serial, no matter what the genre or tropes you're going to use.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one last craft question for you, and then I've got some other ones.
JP, you are asking awesome questions. Oh my gosh, you are just on point, my friend.
I'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So your book, you discuss overlapping serial beats. I'm curious, can you explain how this technique might enhance that reader engagement?
It actually, okay. Let me think about the words for a second, because what I want to convey is something we all already know very well. And I think in the book, as you've read, I do use television shows as a very good example, like multi-season television shows where, you know, there's a story arc that goes over one season or even two seasons, but then the long story over the whole, you know, 10 seasons or whatever is the long story arc. So what holds people and what engages people on that? Well, you as a writer, you need to love your characters and you need to love the world building. For the readers, it's the nested story arcs that are going to keep them coming back. Of course, you need to have characters that they fall in love with. Of course, you need to have interesting ideas and concepts and plots and themes that people can relate to or that resonate, tragedy, whatever. But you need to have these story beats, either something you create intuitively or whether you use a structure like I've done with, you know, in my spreadsheets, so that people have something, their interest hooks onto something. A lot of people say, well, you need to end on a cliffhanger. And, you know, I don't know about you, JP, but I've read a lot of books in my life, and not all of them have cliffhangers at the end of every single chapter. Yeah, Dan Brown actually does. And that's why so many got addicted to his book. It is a great technique if that's what you want to do, but it's not necessary. I've read so many books. I just finished Victoria Goddard's Hands of the Emperor, and I think it has maybe one or two cliffhangers in this whole like 900-page book. It's a very long book, but it's worth it. But the characters are so interesting, and the story arcs that are building, both the character arcs and the plot that's going on behind the character arcs, is so interesting to me that I will just keep reading and reading and reading. And that's what a good framework like story beats will do for you, especially if they're nested. Because as you know, JP, because you've looked at my book, the seasonal short story arcs are the ones that are the in the moment, the exciting thing that's happening. The long story arc A good one right now is One Piece, which, if for the listeners who may not be familiar with it, the anime is like, I think 1,000 plus episodes. The live action is like 8 or whatever. The manga and the anime, they are very, very long. What's the goal? Well, it's the One Piece. They're searching for the One Piece. That's that thing that they are looking for, right? So that is the overarching arc. And there's enemies and there's villains and there's problems, but there's all these little escapades along the way. Some are funny, some are tragic, some are just, interesting. You're just like, what the heck's happening here? But it holds your interest even for something for that long. So that's why I think the nested nature of story beats and story arcs for serials is so important, because otherwise you're just writing a series of novels that are just standalones. And then some authors can carry those on for dozens of novels, but a lot of times readers will fall off after about the first 5 or 10 because there's just nothing else to keep them holding, no matter how much they love the characters.
Yeah,
that was a long answer to a great question.
It was a great answer.
Thank you.
So we've got pantsing serials, you got nonfiction, you got all of these projects that are going on. And I don't know if you know the end date to some of them or not, but how do you ensure consistency and continuity when approaching all of these projects?
Panic is a great one. No. I used to be a project manager in my former life. I was a project manager in IT in the early years of the internet. And I've already dated myself with Star Wars, so yes, I'm old. Then I became a librarian in library science, and I still did a lot of project management, worked in archives there. And so what I bring to all of my different projects, whether the nonfiction craft books, I've got another one coming out, one actually on discovery writing and pantsing coming out in February. It's with the editor now. Whether it's the fiction serial, like the one I'm getting ready to launch, whether it's the blogs that I do on text technology, the history of text technology, which I absolutely love, is not thinking of them in terms of deadlines. I think a lot of people now you've got the project manager in me coming out. It's all your fault. But people think in deadlines, people think in calendars. And I don't know if you're familiar with the HB 90 program by Sarah Cannon. It's a very popular project management system for authors. She's a romance author, so it's very well known in the romance community, but it's a fantastic system. I highly suggest checking out HB 90 for 90 days, because it's a quarterly system of organizing and planning. But people still look at their calendars. Like, I need a due date for this, and then I just need to write 1,000 words a day until I get there. And they're not really thinking of it as a project. They're not thinking of the whole thing as writing the words, editing the words, getting a cover, getting it to the editor. Whether they're working self-publishing, means they're going to have to do all the uploads and all the marketing themselves. So I think of them as projects, and I just try to overlap the projects just a little bit, just enough to keep me busy and to keep things coming out. But I don't think of them so much as like a hard deadline and a calendar framework. I could deep dive into that for a long time, JP. We do not have time for me to go into it. But I work actually as a productivity coach for authors. And that's one of the things that I really work with them on, is to stop them thinking, well, I need to write 500 words a day in order to get this book out. And I'm like, well, do you really? Let's look at really what you're trying to do. Let's look at the career you're trying to make for yourself. Let's look at the 5-year plan, and then let's break it. Let's work backwards from that to what you need to do this week. And so that's how I apply it to my own life, and that's kind of how I keep a lot of plates in the air.
Yeah, that's good advice. I like it. Now I'm curious though, because I don't know how many serial fiction authors we've interviewed on Writers Inc. And we might have some authors that are interested in getting in this. So I'm curious, with your experience, how have you been able to grow and engage your audience on platforms like Ream, and what kind of advice might you have for authors that are looking to get into this realm?
Well, I think there's a certain level of patience. So when you're publishing a book and you're putting the book out into the world, and you're buying some advertising, or you're doing a marketing, book launch and all these things, you're just throwing confetti out into the wind, and you're trying to grab some readers, make them buy your book, and then that's the end of it. Whether you're with a subscription model, whether you're going to be serializing novels or doing a long-running serial, or doing regular short stories, which I know some authors have done on their subscription platforms, you've got to think about, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. You've got to think about, I'm going to come back to your word proximity. You've got to think about your proximity and your relationship with the community that you're building, because this isn't about just trying to grab a quick sale. So I would highly suggest that anyone who's interested in looking at this, one, be patient, but two, get a real clear vision on what kind of community you want to build around your work and how you want those people to interact with your stories. Because it's kind of like building a long-term relationship. Like, this is something you don't want somebody just buying your book, thinking they like it and hitting a star button. You want somebody waiting anxiously for that email to drop to let them know that the next installment is there. You want them invested in your stories, which is in a way kind of sort of being invested in your life. Now, you don't have to put yourself out there like some do. Chris Hopper, for instance, is a great example of someone who really puts himself into his brand. Don't have to do that, but you do have to invest into the relationships and the community building, which is why I thought your word proximity was so good, because it is not necessarily not having boundaries, but it's letting those boundaries kind of brush up against each other, being someone who is there for your long-term fans. That's what I think about it. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's great. Now I would like to know, where do you see the trend of serial writing heading in the next few years, and how do you plan to adapt to those changes?
Well, I hate to bring up the dread word artificial intelligence,
We talk
right? The
about it all
dread
the time.
phrase. Okay, all right. Yeah, I know, but like sometimes listeners are just, people just get so uptight about it really quick. So love it or hate it, it's changing everything. We know this. We know this. And I personally believe that the theory of doubling down on being human is the right tack to take. So what do I see? I see a lot of dreck being pushed out by AI, or writers using AI to quickly fill up, if we were talking like a physical store, quickly fill the shelves. Now, to be honest, that has been going on long before AI came along. That is not new. It's like, we have had terrible Harlequin romance novels forever. We had pulp fiction before that. We had dime novels before that. So having a lot of dreck on the shelves isn't something I find threatening. But when there's going to be that much of it, what subscription authors who are going into subscription models need to understand is just pumping out a lot of words isn't going to do for you what it did in 2010. This isn't the golden age of Kindle, right? Of KU. This is the starting of the new age of subscriptions and so many different variables in technology. You've really got to build, another dreaded word, a brand. But it has to be not just a fun logo and a great tagline. It has to be, again, about that community that you're building. So I really see, and I don't know if you've guys have talked to Michael Evans. I know he's been doing a lot of rounds. He's the CEO of Ream, and he's very invested in the community idea. But I think he's on the right track, because if there's going to be so much out there that can be so easily replicated, what's going to make your thing stand apart? So I think it's going to be less about the rapid release schedule type of thing, process that's been popular. I think that's still going to work. But I think as you get into this, it's going to be more about making those community connections. It's going to be more about building up a sustainable career that you can keep doing for 5, 10, 20 years, because it's going to be about your brand and you as a human making something special that nobody else can make.
Yeah.
So it's going to be some big changes, I think.
Agreed. And you've given tons of lovely and wonderful advice, and I'm curious, do you have any additional advice that you would like to give to a new writer starting out before we end this?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. And I had actually, I'm not trying to sell anybody on anything, but it's an idea that I believe so strongly about that I created a community for it. It's called Write 1 Million Words. Because if you, and you don't have to actually like keep a spreadsheet if you don't want to, but instead of thinking I need to write the next book, instead of thinking I need to do this course or follow this technique, think of studying your craft, doing your art, writing your stories with the goal of writing towards 1 million words. Because believe me, the more you write, the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Stop trying to polish that one novel you've written. Okay, I know you've rewritten it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times now. Stop that, people. Just stop it. Put that one aside and start writing the next one, because it's in writing and the actual practice of the thing that you're going to make progress. Like, nobody tells a sports, an athlete, well, just watch another video of somebody running that race. Just watch another video. Just watch. No, run. You need to run. And for us, running is writing. Write more. You will learn the craft, you will learn the industry, and you will learn what makes you happy and what you find personally fulfilling as an author. So 1 million words, make that your long-term goal. And I guarantee you will make progress.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, KimBoo York, where can people find you and become an unstoppable storyteller? How to craft compelling serials?
Well, they can find me. The best place is, of course, my website. It's houseofyork.info. That's House of York, one word, .info. I have links there to my books. A books page where they can pick the book they're interested in. They can buy it from me, buying direct, but I also have all my books on all the major distributors as well. So if you go there, you'll see that. It also has a link to my podcast. It has a link to all of my social media, a link to the 1 Million Words Club if anybody's interested in that. So they'll find everything there, and also a way to reach me if they want to reach out to me personally, which I always welcome. Always glad to hear from people if you have questions about anything I've said or anything I've written.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on by.
Not a problem, JP. I'm so honored that you guys invited me to be on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.
I love talking about serial fiction. And I like what they were talking about, that how it's different because of its proximity, which is very true. It's a different kind of medium. You're posting usually as you're writing. You're interacting closely with the fans and building a community relationship. Have any of you tried serial writing? Is this a thing you do? Let's hear about it, Kevin.
I have one book out now that started as a serial fiction story on Substack.
Yeah.
And that did well. I mean, I'm still kind of building the audience at that point, so I think a lot of people didn't know quite what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was an interesting process. I don't know that I necessarily want to repeat it, because I didn't mind that I was sharing the thing as I was writing it, but it made me ultra paranoid, because I normally write and then I loop back and I change things.
Yeah.
I want that freedom, but I didn't feel like I felt. I mean, I guess I could have done that anyway, but I just felt like that was wrong. I wanted to present what they read in the final book, so it is what it was.
And this is like because I wrote back in 2012 sort of a serial thing, and it just released in the old school serial style. And this is more of maybe not collaborative, but more interactive. In some cases, collaborative with the readers, right? So where they're seeing it happens and they're commenting.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a couple. There's Matt Dinneman, Dungeon Crawler Carl guy. He does it. Shirloon does his too, and an Aussie author. But I have noticed, because I've never tried this, and I feel the same as you, Kevin, that it would make me a little bit nervous because I go back and change stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And there'll be stuff, because you're committed now, right? This is a chapter that's out, and now we're moving on. And I have noticed in some instances where the author that does it this way sort of cheats it a bit, because they might paint themselves into a corner. So later on in the stories, they'll say, "Oh, I did mention when I mentioned that other thing before that I had a magic bazooka in my coat."
Right. Yeah, that's what killed me was, a lot of times I'll think of something later in the book that I realize, okay, I need that to exist. And so I go back and I put it in, and that makes me look like I'm very intelligent.
Yeah.
But you can't do that when they're seeing you do it on the fly. So
No.
you got to think of all these
Yeah.
things in advance. It's very different.
It's a very difficult challenge.
I've never done that, but
Yeah.
can't you just write it ahead of time and then just release it as a serial?
No.
I mean, isn't that a thing
And
you can
I will
do?
tell you
I mean,
why.
you can, but that
You
was
can until a certain point.
Yeah.
But the point of serials is they're ongoing, right? So
right.
I started a serial with my co-author. We pen name it
I see.
on Vela when it first launched in July 2021. And we have been writing ever since. We started with 80,000 words before we went out on their outlined, planned, adapted it for serial fiction. And then,
Yeah.
and then you have to post every week, right? Or we were posting twice a week to keep your audience engaged, 2 chapters a week. You run out of stuff. So,
So it just never ends? The story never
right, we're
ends?
on, it never ends. We're on season
Oh,
6. So it's about the equivalent of 6 novel-length books because we do them in seasons. And at some point, you're just flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, but it is freeing too.
fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's intimidating in some ways because you can't change anything. It's posted. People have read it.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of a fun challenge because you're like, well, where do we go next? So I enjoy it, but I think maybe 6 seasons, we may wrap the story after 6 seasons because I don't know where we're going now.
Do you get any of the well actually folks who like, well, actually you wrote in chapter 3 that Bob had 2 heads
and
but now Bob has 3.
No.
Do you get any of those folks?
We don't. I know people do. Actually, everyone who has commented has been lovely. So thank you to our commenters. But yeah.
On another note, I love KimBoo was talking about this idea of, I think she called resilience, right? This idea that you've really got to build up those calluses.
Yep.
And I thought that was a great note because, there's a lot of reasons and many people that try and write end up falling away by the wayside because it's hard. Writing is the greatest thing in the world, but it's really, really hard. And the more you stick to it and the more you build up those calluses, that's what separates people that try and do this long term or maybe as a career and those that sort of dabble in it and fall away.
Yeah.
So I think a huge part of success, I agree with her, a huge part of success is just sticking it out and hanging in there and getting your 1,000,000 words written.
Yep.
So I thought that was really great.
Yeah, you just got to be brave.
Not in that serial. You're not aiming for 1,000,000 words in this serial.
Well, you might be by the time you're done.
You might.
You're close.
So if you're aiming for 1,000,000 words in a serial, is that alphabet serial?
Oh.
There's the dad joke for the episode.
I know, that was bad.
So we got that out of the way.
I did like, when she was talking about if you're going to do a serial, you really have to think about your brand. And that's more than a logo or a graphic. That's really having a clear vision of what kind of community you want to build around and how you want to interact. So, yeah.
Yeah. And brand is something that I talk to people about a lot. I'm actually doing a talk about brand for Nink in September. And that that idea of folding the community into the brand, like we talk about platform, that's something I hadn't really considered or thought about. So I'm stealing that to add to my talk, but it is important. Like, it's not just how am I presenting myself to my potential readers or existing readers. It's like, what's the relationship we have? Like, how do they fit? How does that group fit in the brand? Because you think a lot about the persona of the ideal reader. And I think that fits in there. That's a puzzle piece there. To determine like what you should be doing in terms of marketing and how to control the marketing. What how often do you do certain things? How often do you send an email, or how often do you post on TikTok or something like that? That's where your marketing
How are you
is.
willing to interact? Yeah.
Do you think there's an element of brand that is also like this idea of theme? People always say that you don't want to go into the book with an idea of theme, that you sort of write it and the theme begins to evolve and you can kind of embrace it in some way. Do you think that, you can come in and say, this is my brand, but do you think as you evolve that eventually your brand kind of takes a bit of a life of its own and then you sort of embrace some of that? Or do you think it's more active?
Don't you think that's what we've seen with, like movie franchises and stuff where, for example, Indiana Jones, there's like OG Indiana Jones that I grew up with and loved. And then once you got past him and his pop running around on an adventure, it kind of, to me, lost its appeal. Like, everything that's happened since then has not been all that interesting to me. But there are people who still love it, and there's new people coming in who love it. So it's like the brand evolved. So I think that kind of speaks to what you're talking about, Dig.
I do think brands evolve, and especially when it's a person. You're an author. I mean, if you do branding well, like, you're obviously going to come out with a debut, and you're going to start building a fan base. And brand. I'm actually quite lucky. My friend does branding, so it's an interesting thing that you can, have a very strong foundation of what your brand is, which is, like, sort of the genre that you write. But if, you're very careful and smart, you can build around that in, like, different areas.
Yeah. But I think it is important to think about, and, like, especially she said, how do you want to interact with your audience? Like, do you want a Discord channel? I would find that hard to sustain, but you have to think about, what are you willing to do on a regular basis, and can you sustain that? I also thought it was important what she said for serials is because the stories are more like comics or like TV shows. You have these short stories, arcs inside a longer or an overarching arc. And she spoke about really just investing in your world. Like, you need a world you want to have adventures in for a really long time. So you need to find a world that is interesting to you. And I think that's a really good tip for serial fiction.
It's almost like you're a resident in that world. So you got to make sure you want to be there a while.
Yeah. Do you think every chapter should end on a cliffhanger? Discuss.
Yes, I do. I think that every chapter should leave the reader wanting more in some way. I don't think it always has to be like an epic cliffhanger. Even if it's just this chapter ends on, like, your B story is about the romance between these two characters, but the A story is all action and adventure. Like, that B story could be the way that chapter ends. Like, she called and he ignored her text for some reason or something like that. It doesn't have to be major drama, but I do think you need open loops. I think that's what you're aiming for.
I like those in normal books too. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah. I think, if it's the same cliffhanger chapter end after chapter end, it can get kind of repetitive. So I think you just make sure you're not doing the same thing over and over at the end of every chapter. But yeah. I also like that she talked about project management, because this is something that I am terrible at. I'm a really bad project manager and organizer. Have you tried any of that software? What did she talk about? HB90 system or anything that helps you think of your novel as like an overall project?
I use Plotter.
I use Plotter.
You use Plotter for that? Plotter. Cameron's going to love that. I'm going to tell him that.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I love Plotter. Like, it organizes everything, and I can add as many, like.
That's a good one.
Because you have the list down the sides. You can do like timelines, characters, plot arcs, individual character arcs, who needs to do what when, and then you can just like line it up along your chapters, so it becomes a very appealing.
It breaks my heart to hear you say things like this, because I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to be that efficient. I'm never going to be that guy. I have an Apple Note that's like 9 miles long.
I have 4 Word documents with multiple versions, and some of them are called recovered, if that makes you feel any better, Kevin.
I can't. What I like about Plotter is that I love, I am very much that, like, Post-it note on the wall, like all the different cards and stuff. And so now it takes that and it makes it that virtually. So, and it's easy to drag and drop, and I can make them all different colors, and it's very visually pleasing, and I really enjoy it.
I do everything very physically all around me on my desk. If you could see my desk right now, it's a tragedy. It looks like I've got newspaper and scissors and I'm composing ransom notes. It's just, there's a mess everywhere around me. And that's my version of software. Just this horrible desk.
All right, so I'm somewhere between Dick and Jena because I cannot work with that clutter around me.
Yeah.
Like if you were to see my desk, it's immaculate.
Mine is. I'm not going to turn my camera to the side because it'll just make you cry, Kevin.
No, thank you.
Awesome. All right. So up next week, it's Kate White. Kate is the former editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine and a New York Times and US Today bestselling author of 9 psychological thrillers. She's back with her latest book, The Last Time She Saw Him. It's going to be great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.